guys! Okay, so I just wanted to make a really quick video going over what the application process looks like to become a foster parent. A lot of people have asked me just like, how do I get licensed for foster care? Okay, so there's 4 basic steps. There's the paperwork, the training, the home inspection, and the interview process. So after those 4 things, your licensing agency will write up a home study, which is basically like a summary of all of those things, send it off to the state, and then the state makes the final decision on whether you get licensed or not. Okay, so I'm just going to dive right in onto the paperwork. So the first piece of paperwork that you have to do is the initial application. Keep in mind, all of this stuff is going to be different from state to state. We live in Arizona, so this is all very specific to like our county and our state. I'm gonna guess it's fairly similar from state to state, but I'm not really sure. Okay, so the first piece we had to do was the initial application. The initial application was just like all of our basic info: name, birth date, social security number, marital status, driver's license, all of that stuff. It also included information about our household as far as everybody who lives here, their social security number, date of birth, all of that. Our employment history for the last 10 years. We had to have 5 references. 2 were able to be family, and then 3 could not be family. And they had to know both Zach and I. We had to fill out our criminal and civil action history. This was just like any court records, anything like that, any arrests, all had to be submitted on that initial application. We had to give them information about our vehicle, license plate number, registration, insurance info. We had to break down our budget for them and give them proof of income. Basically, they just want to make sure that you're able to meet all of your needs, all of your bills, and then also have a little bit left over to cover the needs of caring for a foster child. That is reimbursed, but you have to be able to provide it up front, and then you submit for reimbursement. We had to give them information about a pool, if we had one, and any guns we own must be locked up. And then a few other things. Okay, so animals, they just want to make sure they're up to date on their rabies vaccinations and that they don't have issues being around children. And then the very last part of that initial application was your licensing preferences. So it's just 2 questions. What age do you want to foster and what gender? And for Zach and I, we did either male or female, and we got licensed for 0 to 2. Okay, so that was the first piece of paperwork. After that, there is the statement of understanding. That was something that we filled out when our licensing agency worker came out to our house for the first time. And she gave us all this paperwork, and this was just something we signed that we understand what the application process looks like to become licensed, and that we agree to do all of those things. The third piece of paperwork was the foster home agreement, and this was just saying that how we plan to transport the child, how we plan to deal with conflicts such as different religions or different sexual preferences, and we just had to agree that we would accommodate the child to the best of our ability. The 4th and the 5th piece of paperwork were signed in training, in our 2nd and 3rd weeks of training. This was the confidentiality agreement and the discipline agreement. So as far as confidentiality goes, we are not allowed to share really anything about the case of our placement besides things that must be shared with therapists or school workers or things like that in order to keep everybody safe and everybody functioning. So we are allowed to share on social media. I don't have to put like hearts over their faces or anything like that. The only thing that we're not allowed to do is say, this is our foster child, blah, blah, blah. So, side note, if you are friends with us on social media, please, please, please do not comment like, oh, you got your first foster placement, or, oh, is this your new foster kid? Because then we have to delete the comment or take the photo down, because it's identifying them as a foster child. Okay, the discipline agreement basically just saying we cannot do any sort of physical punishment. It includes like spanking, flicking, hitting, soap in the mouth, all of the above. Can't do any of that with our foster children. Let's see, we had to, again, disclose any criminal or civil history, and that had to be notarized. Then we did an assessment guide. This was probably the hardest part of the paperwork to do at the beginning because it was asking things like, would you take a child with autism? Would you take a child with cerebral palsy? Would you take a gay child? Would you take a pregnant teenager? All of these things, and it was like yes, no, or maybe. Basically, we ended up just putting maybe for everything because we felt like it varied so much case to case that we couldn't just say yes or no. We had to do a health self-disclosure, basically saying that mentally, emotionally, physically, we are able to care for children. And then we have to get a physical done and get that signed by a physician. So basically, they just have to verify that we are okay to take care of kids. The 10th piece of paperwork were Adam Walsh's, and those are just background checks for any of the states we lived in the past 5 years. Unfortunately, Zach and I have both lived in 3 different states in the last 5 years, so we had a lot of those to do, and we're still waiting on all of those, which could take a really long time. I advise doing those very, very first if you are starting the process. Okay, we had to get fingerprints done. We had to get level 1 fingerprint clearance cards. We just scheduled this at some little like mailing store. Went in, did that, and they sent us our cards really quickly, within the week, I think. We have to be CPR and first aid certified. Luckily, our licensing agency provided that for us. If we didn't have it, I was already up to date, but Zach needed to renew his, so he did that through our licensing agency. Okay, I think that's all the paperwork as far as forms. And then there's a bunch of things you have to submit copies of. And I'm just going to list those off. So your driver's license, social security card, birth certificate, proof of citizenship, immunization records, vehicle registration, vehicle insurance, your evacuation plan for emergency in your home, proof of income, your marriage license, and any rabies vaccinations for animals in the home. So in addition to all the forms you filled out, you also had to have paper copies of these that you scanned in and sent to your licensing agency. Okay, so that's all the paperwork. The second step is the training. So we have 30 hours of training that we have to submit before we can be licensed. 15 of this is in person and 15 is online. So we have 5 weeks of 3 hours of training once a week. So we do it on Monday nights, and it's really informative and much more helpful and less boring than I ever thought it would be. The online training is really dreadful. I mean, it is awful. Like, it's really good information, but it's just not put together in an engaging or exciting way. So that's kind of a drag, but we're just doing a little bit week by week, and we are almost through it. Okay, so after you do your training, then you will have a social worker come out to your house, and we have to do 4 hours worth of interviews. These won't be all at once, but there will be some that Zach and I do together, and then also some that we do separately. Okay, and then the other piece of the application process is your home inspection. And I've also had a lot of questions about this, like what can you have, what can't you have, does it have to be locked up, all of that stuff. So I think I'll just do a separate video. We're having our home inspection next week, no, 2 weeks. So I will just see how that goes, and then maybe do another video on that once I really know what it's going to be like. Okay, so I know that sounds like a lot. It really is not bad, all said and done, considering that they are putting other people's children in your house to live here. And to them, you're a complete stranger. So basically, they just want to have all the information. Your licensing agency will write this all up, send it off to the state, and then the state has to be able to look at this like packet of information that our licensing agency sends them and say like, yes, they are fit to parent other people's children, which is crazy to think about. But that's why there's so much information required and so many interviews and home inspection, and they just want to make sure that the kiddos are going to go to a safe place. So if you have any other questions about what it takes to become a foster parent, I'd be happy to answer those or help you find an answer if I don't know. Other than that, if you need some encouragement to become a foster parent, I will always cheer you on. Alright guys, thanks for watching.